The 1st of September, 1939. Germany invades Poland. World War II begins. For the next 6 years, over 100 million people from more than 50 nations will fight. 60 to 80 million will die. But when we talk about World War II, we hear the same names: Britain, America, Germany, Russia. What about the others? What about the French resistance fighters who sabotaged Nazi supply lines? What about the Canadian soldiers who stormed Juno Beach on D-Day? What about the Australian pilots who fought in the Pacific? What about the Indian soldiers who battled in Burma? This is their story. The forgotten allies, the untold heroes, the voices history left behind. When you think of World War II, you think of big moments: Pearl Harbor, D-Day, Stalingrad, Hiroshima. You think of big names: Churchill, Roosevelt, Hitler, Stalin. You think of clear sides: the Allies versus the Axis, good versus evil. But history is written by the victors, and often it's written by the loudest voices. The truth is far more complex. World War II wasn't won by one country. It wasn't even won by 2 or 3. It was won by dozens of nations, millions of soldiers, and countless civilians who resisted, sabotaged, and sacrificed everything. France didn't just surrender. Canada didn't just follow Britain. America didn't just save the day at the last minute. The real story is messier, more tragic, more human, and far more inspiring. In American schools, World War II is often taught as a story of American heroism. The US joined the war, defeated the Nazis, and saved the world. In British schools, the narrative centers on Churchill's defiance and the Battle of Britain. In Russian schools, it's about the Soviet Union's massive sacrifices on the Eastern Front. Each nation tells a version of history that makes itself the hero. But what about the nations that don't get to write the textbooks? What about the soldiers who fought and died without recognition? What about the resistance fighters who sabotaged Nazi operations in the reponed shadows? What about the civilians who endured occupation, starvation, and terror? This is their story, and it's time we told it. Let's start with the country everyone thinks gave up without a fight. The 22nd of June 1940. Compiègne, France. Adolf Hitler sits in the same railway car where Germany signed the armistice ending World War I in 1918. Now, 22 years later, France is signing an armistice with Nazi Germany. To the world, it looks like surrender. France, one of Europe's great powers, the nation that held the line in WWII, has fallen in just 6 weeks. Nazi flags fly over Paris, German soldiers march down the Champs-Élysées. The Eiffel Tower becomes a symbol of occupation. Photos of Hitler posing in front of the Eiffel Tower circulate worldwide. The message is clear: France is defeated. But surrender is not the end of the story. The Vichy regime and collaboration. After the armistice, France is divided into 2 zones. Northern France and the Atlantic coast are directly occupied by Germany. Southern France is governed by the Vichy regime, a puppet government led by Marshal Philippe Pétain, a WWII hero. Pétain collaborates with the Nazis. His government rounds up Jews and sends them to concentration camps, enforces Nazi racial laws, sends French workers to German factories, provides resources to the German war machine. Vichy France becomes complicit in the Holocaust. Over 75,000 French Jews are deported. Fewer than 3,000 survive. But not all French accept this. The Free French Forces. In London, a French general named Charles de Gaulle refuses to surrender. On the 18th of June, 1940, just 4 days after Paris falls, he broadcasts a speech on BBC radio. France has lost a battle, but France has not lost the war. He forms the Free French Forces, an army in exile. They fight alongside the British in North Africa, the Middle East, and eventually in France itself. At first, the Free French are small, just a few thousand soldiers. But by 1944, they number over 400,000. They fight in North Africa 1,940 to 1,943, Syria and Lebanon 1,000, 1941. Italy 1943 to 1944. France 1944. But the real resistance happens inside. France. Jean-Pierre Dubois, a voice of the resistance. Jean-Pierre is 19 years old when the Nazis occupy Paris in June 1940. He's a university student studying philosophy at the Sorbonne. His professors tell him to keep his head down, stay safe, wait for the war to end. But Jean-Pierre can't. He watches German soldiers patrol his streets. He sees Jewish neighbors forced to wear yellow stars. He hears stories of friends arrested and sent to camps. In 1941, he joins a resistance cell, a small group of students, workers, and teachers who operate in secret. They print underground newspapers exposing Nazi atrocities. They gather intelligence on German troop movements and pass it to the Allies. They hide Jewish families in attics and basements, and they sabotage. The sabotage campaign Jean-Pierre's cell targets Nazi infrastructure. They cut telephone lines used by German command posts. They derail trains carrying supplies to the Eastern Front. They blow up fuel depots. It's dangerous work. If caught, they'll be tortured by the Gestapo and executed. In 1943, Jean-Pierre's cell plans their most ambitious operation: sabotage a German ammunition depot outside Paris. The plan is simple but risky. They'll infiltrate the depot at night, plant explosives, and escape before the blast. Jean-Pierre volunteers, so does his best friend, Antoine. On a cold October night, they slip past German patrols. They reach the depot, they plant the charges, and they run. The explosion is massive. Flames light up the night sky. German ammunition intended for the Eastern Front is destroyed. But the Gestapo responds with brutal reprisals. They arrest dozens of suspected resistance members. They torture them for information. They execute them in public squares as a warning. Antoine is caught. The Gestapo tortures him for 3 days. He doesn't give up the names of his comrades. On the 4th day, they shoot him in the back of the head. Jean-Pierre survives the war, but he never forgets the price of resistance. At Antoine's funeral in 1945, Jean-Pierre says, "We were just kids. We didn't know if we'd live or die. We just knew we had to fight." The cost of liberation. By 1944, the Allies have landed in Normandy. Paris is liberated on the 25th of August 1944. De Gaulle marches down the Champs-Élysées in triumph. Thousands cheer. But France has paid a terrible price. 600,000 French civilians dead, 200,000 French soldiers killed, 75,000 Jews deported and murdered, tens of thousands executed by the Nazis, entire villages destroyed in reprisal. Attacks. France didn't just surrender. France bled, France resisted, France fought, and history needs to remember that. But what about the Germans themselves? Were they all monsters? Or were some trapped in a nightmare they couldn't escape? Here's a question most people don't ask. Not every German soldier was a Nazi. Let that sink in for a moment. The German military, the Wehrmacht, had over 18 million soldiers during World War II. Not all of them joined willingly. Many were drafted. Many opposed Hitler's regime. But refusing to serve meant execution. So they fought, and many of them died. Klaus Müller, the soldier who questioned everything. Klaus Müller is 22 years old when he's drafted into the Wehrmacht in 1941. He's from a small town in Bavaria. His father was a school teacher, his mother, a nurse. They're not Nazis. They don't attend party rallies. They keep their heads down. But when Klaus receives his draft notice, he has no choice. He's sent to the Eastern Front, the brutal war against the Soviet Union. What he sees there haunts him for the rest of his life. The Eastern Front. Hell on earth. The Eastern Front is the deadliest theatre of World War II. Over 30 million people die there, more than all other theatres, combined. Klaus fights in the Battle of Moscow, 1941 to 1942. The Siege of Leningrad, 1941 to 1,944. The Battle of Stalingrad, 1,942 to 1,943. The conditions are horrific. Winter temperatures drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Soldiers freeze to death in their trenches. Frostbite is common. Ammunition freezes. Tanks won't start. But the cold is the least of their problems. Klaus witnesses mass executions of Soviet prisoners. He sees villages burned to the ground. He hears screams from civilians caught in the crossfire. He's ordered to shoot anyone suspected of being a partisan Soviet resistance fighters. Klaus doesn't participate in the atrocities, but he witnesses them, and he's powerless to stop them. In his diary, discovered decades later, Klaus writes, "We're told we're fighting for Germany's survival, but all I see is death, ours and theirs. I don't know who the enemy is anymore." Wounded and sent home. In 1943, Klaus is wounded during the Battle of Kursk, one of the largest tank battles in history. Shrapnel tears through his leg. He's evacuated to a field hospital, then sent back to Germany to recover. Back home, he sees another side of the war. Allied bombing raids destroy entire German cities. His hometown of Hamburg is firebombed in July 1943. Operation Gomorrah kills 40,000 civilians in one night. Klaus's family survives, but their home is destroyed. His younger sister is killed in the attack. Klaus realizes something terrible. This war has no heroes, only victims. The German resistance, the plot to kill Hitler. Not all Germans supported Hitler. Throughout the war, various groups plot to overthrow the Nazi regime. Military officers, politicians, intellectuals, and even some Nazi party members join the resistance. The most famous attempt happens on the 20th of July 1944. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, a decorated Wehrmacht officer, plants a bomb in Hitler's headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, in East Prussia. The plan: 1. Kill Hitler. 2. Seize control of the government. 3. Negotiate peace with the Allies. At 12:42 p.m., the bomb explodes. 4 people are killed. But Hitler survives with minor injuries. The conspirators are arrested within hours. They're tortured, tried, and executed. Stauffenberg is shot that same night. His last words: "Long live sacred Germany." Over 7,000 people are arrested in the aftermath. Nearly 5,000 are executed. The resistance fails. But it proves something important. Not all Germans were Nazis. Some fought back. The forgotten suffering of German civilians. By 1945, Germany is in ruins. Allied bombing campaigns have destroyed Hamburg, 40,000 dead, Dresden, 25,000 dead, Berlin, 50,000 dead, dozens of other cities, over 400,000 German civilians die in the bombings. Millions are left homeless. When the Red Army advances into Germany, Soviet soldiers exact brutal revenge. Mass rapes, summary executions, entire towns emptied. An estimated 2 million German women are raped by Soviet soldiers. Many are killed afterward. Does this justify Germany's crimes? Absolutely not. Germany started the war. Germany committed the Holocaust. Germany bears responsibility. But it's a reminder that war destroys everyone. Soldiers, civilians, victors, vanquished. Klaus survives the war. He returns to his ruined hometown. He marries. He has children. But he never talks about the war. He can't. In 1987, shortly before his death, he tells his grandson, "War doesn't make heroes. It makes ghosts. And I've been a ghost since 1945. There are no clean hands in war." Now, let's talk about the country everyone thinks won the war single-handedly. The 7th of December 1941. 7:55 a.m. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Japanese planes attack the US. Pacific Fleet. Over 2,400 Americans die. 8 battleships are sunk or damaged. 188 aircraft are destroyed. The next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addresses Congress. Yesterday, the 7th of December, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. Congress declares war on Japan. 3 days later, Germany declares war on the US. America is finally in the fight. But here's what most people forget. America didn't win the war alone. Isolationism and late entry. In 1939, when the war starts, America wants nothing to do with it. The Great Depression has devastated the economy. Millions are unemployed. Americans don't want to send their sons to die in another European war. President Roosevelt wants to help Britain and France, but Congress and the American public oppose involvement. America passes neutrality acts designed to keep the country out of the conflict. But behind the scenes, America is already involved. Through the Lend-Lease program, America sends weapons, food, and supplies to Britain and the Soviet Union. By 1945, America has provided $50 billion in aid, equivalent to over $700 billion today. 400,000 aircraft, 12,000 armored vehicles, 2,000 ships. Billions of rounds of ammunition, America's factories, become the arsenal of democracy. But it's the soldiers, the men who fight and die, who truly turn the tide. James Jimmy Carter, paratrooper. D-Day, Jimmy Carter, no relation to the future president, is a private in the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. He's 20 years old. He grew up on a farm in Iowa. He'd never left the state until he joined the Army. On the 5th of June 1944, he boards a C-47 transport plane in England. His mission? Parachute into Normandy hours before the D-Day invasion, secure key roads and bridges, prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Intelligence estimates 70% casualties. It's a suicide mission. At 1:30 a.m. on June 6, Jimmy jumps. The plane is hit by anti-aircraft fire. It lurches. Soldiers are thrown against the walls. Jimmy jumps anyway. He descends through darkness. Tracers light up the sky. He hears explosions. He sees other parachutes, some on fire. He lands hard, not on solid ground. In a swamp, he sinks to his chest in cold, muddy water. His equipment weighs him down. He struggles to free himself from his parachute. Around him, other paratroopers drown in the swamp, too weighted down, too disoriented. Jimmy cuts himself free. He wades to dry land, but he's lost, separated from his unit. German patrols are everywhere. For 3 days, Jimmy hides during the day and moves at night. He scavenges food from dead soldiers. He drinks from muddy streams. On the 3rd day, he encounters a group of American soldiers. He's safe. He fights through Normandy, Holland, and Belgium. He survives the Battle of the Bulge, the bloodiest battle fought by US forces in World War II. He survives the war. But 50 years later, he still has nightmares. He still hears the screams. He still sees his friends drowning in that swamp. War doesn't end when the fighting stops. America's contribution, more than just soldiers. Over 400,000 died. But America's real contribution was industrial. 300,000 aircraft produced, 89,000 tanks built, 3 million machine guns manufactured, 193,000 artillery pieces. Billions of rounds of ammunition American factories ran. 24/7. Women, Rosie the Riveters, joined the workforce in record numbers, building planes, tanks, and ships. Without American production, the Allies couldn't have sustained the war effort. But that doesn't mean America won the war alone. The Soviet Union lost over 27 million people, more than any other nation. Britain held the line in 1940 when it stood alone against Nazi Germany. And countless other nations, France, Canada, Australia, India, made enormous sacrifices. It was a team effort. And some of the most important players have been forgotten. Let's talk about the soldiers who came from the other side of the world to fight a war that wasn't theirs. When Britain declared war on Germany on the 3rd of September 1939, it wasn't fighting alone. The British Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa, and others joined the fight. Over 5 million Commonwealth soldiers served in World War II. Hundreds of thousands died. But their stories are often overshadowed by the big players. Canada, first to fight, last to be remembered. Canada declared war on Germany on the 10th of September 1939, 1 week after Britain. Over 1 million Canadians served in World War II. That's nearly 10% of the population. 45,000 Canadians died. William Bill Thompson, Juno Beach, D-Day. Bill is a corporal in the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. He's 23 years old, from a small town in Ontario. Before the war, he worked in his father's hardware store. On the 6th of June 1944, he's part of the D-Day invasion. His unit is assigned to Juno Beach, one of 5 landing zones. At 7:45 a.m., Bill's landing craft approaches the beach. The beach is heavily fortified. German machine guns, mortars and artillery are positioned in concrete bunkers. The first wave of soldiers is cut down before they reach the sand. Bill's landing craft hits a sandbar 100 yards from shore. The ramp drops. Cold seawater rushes in. Bill jumps. The water is chest deep. He sees soldiers shot before they take 3 steps. Bodies float in the surf. The water turns red, but he keeps moving. He reaches the beach. Bullets kick up sand around him. He dives behind a disabled tank. His sergeant yells, "Move or die!" Bill charges the German bunkers. He throws grenades. He fires his rifle. He doesn't think. He just reacts. By the end of the day, Canadian forces have advanced further inland than any other Allied unit, nearly 7 miles. But the cost is heavy. 340 Canadians die on Juno Beach. Over 500 are wounded. Bill survives, but he's wounded 3 more times before the war ends. In 2004, on the 60th anniversary of D-Day, Bill returns to Juno Beach. He stands on the sand where he nearly died. He salutes his fallen comrades. A reporter asks him, "Do you think people remember Canada's role in D-Day?" Bill shakes his head. "Most Americans don't even know we were there." Canada took Juno Beach. But how many people know that? Australia and New Zealand, the Pacific War. While Europe dominates the history books, the Pacific theatre was just as brutal. Australian and New Zealand forces fought Japanese armies across Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Southeast Asia. The conditions were horrific. Dense jungles where visibility was measured in feet, tropical diseases, malaria, dysentery, typhus. Brutal hand-to-hand combat. Japanese soldiers who refused to surrender, often fighting to the death. The Battle of Kokoda, 1942, is one of the bloodiest campaigns in Australian history. Australian soldiers, many of them teenagers, fought Japanese forces along the Kokoda Track, a treacherous jungle trail in Papua New Guinea. The fighting was savage. No supply lines, no medical support. Just mud, disease, and death. Over 40,000 Australian soldiers died in World War II. New Zealand lost 12,000. But how often do we hear their stories? India, the largest volunteer army in history. Here's a fact most people don't know. India contributed over 2.5 million soldiers to the Allied war effort. It was the largest volunteer army in history. Ravi Singh, fighting in Burma. Ravi is a soldier in the British Indian Army. He's 21 years old, from a village in Punjab. In 1942, he's sent to Burma, modern-day Myanmar, to fight the Japanese. The Burma campaign is one of the war's deadliest. Soldiers fight in monsoon rains that turn the jungle into a swamp, thick jungles teeming with leeches, snakes, and insects. Mountainous terrain with no roads. Ravi's unit is part of the Forgotten Army, so named because they receive little support or recognition from the British government. They fight for 3 years. Thousands die from disease and starvation, but they hold the line. They stop the Japanese advance into India. In 1945, Ravi's unit helps recapture Burma. The Japanese are defeated. Ravi survives. But when he returns home in 1946, there's no parade, no medals, no recognition. India gains independence in 1947, but the soldiers who fought for the Allies are largely forgotten. Why don't we talk about them? These stories from France, Germany, America, Canada, Australia, India are just a fraction of the full picture. In recent years, historians have uncovered new footage, documents, and testimonies that reveal hidden aspects of World War II. Restored archival footage. Projects like Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old, 2018, have restored WWII footage using modern technology. Similar efforts are underway for World War II. Colorization of black and white films, AI enhancement of grainy footage, 3D reconstruction of battlefields. Suddenly, soldiers aren't distant figures in grainy film. They're real people, young, scared, human. We see their faces, we hear their voices, we feel their fear. Personal testimonies. In the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds, oral history projects recorded interviews with thousands of World War II veterans before they passed away. These testimonies reveal the psychological toll of combat, PTSD, survivor's guilt, depression, acts of kindness between enemies, German and Allied soldiers sharing cigarettes during truces. Moments of moral complexity. Soldiers ordered to commit atrocities, struggling with their conscience. The long-term trauma soldiers carried: nightmares, flashbacks, inability to reintegrate into civilian life. One veteran, interviewed in 1995, said, "I came home in 1945, but part of me never left that battlefield. I see my friends every night. I hear them calling for help, and I can't save them." Declassified documents. Governments have declassified millions of World War II documents, revealing secret operations, covert missions that changed the war's outcome, intelligence failures, mistakes that cost thousands of lives, war crimes covered up, atrocities committed by Allied forces, diplomatic intrigues, backroom deals that shaped the post-war world, for example. In 2010, Britain declassified documents revealing that Winston Churchill ordered the firebombing of German cities specifically to terrorize civilians, a violation of international law. In 2015, Russia released documents showing Stalin knew about the Katyn massacre, the execution of 22,000 Polish officers, but blamed it on the Nazis for decades. The more we learn, the more complex the story becomes. Jean-Pierre, the French resistance fighter, lived to see Paris liberated in August 1944. He married, he had children, he became a teacher. But he never forgot Antoine, his best friend, tortured and executed by the Gestapo. Every year, on the anniversary of Antoine's death, Jean-Pierre visited his grave. He carried guilt. Why did I survive when so many others didn't? Klaus, the German soldier, returned to his ruined hometown in 1945. He rebuilt his life. He worked as a carpenter. He raised a family. But he was haunted by what he witnessed on the Eastern Front. He rarely spoke about the war. When he did, he cried. Jimmy, the American paratrooper, came home a hero in 1945. But he struggled with PTSD for decades. He had nightmares. He drank to forget. It wasn't until the 1,980 seconds when PTSD was finally recognized as a medical condition that he sought help. Bill, the Canadian soldier, survived D-Day and the liberation of Europe. But Canada's contribution is often forgotten in American and British narratives. In 2019, at age 98, Bill gave his final interview. He said, "We didn't fight for recognition. We fought because it was right. But it would be nice if people remembered." Ravi, the Indian soldier, returned to a newly independent India in 1947. He received no pension, no veterans' benefits, no recognition. He worked as a farmer until his death in 1985. His grandchildren only learned he fought in World War II when they found his old uniform in a trunk after he died. Why do we forget? Because history is written by the victors. Because narratives are simplified for textbooks and movies. Because it's easier to tell a story with clear heroes and villains than to grapple with complexity. But the truth is, France didn't just surrender, it resisted, fought, and bled. Germany wasn't just evil, it had dissenters, resistors, and millions of victims. America didn't win alone, it was part of a global coalition. The Commonwealth forces were essential but often ignored in mainstream narratives. Millions of soldiers from dozens of nations fought and died, and their stories deserve to be told. Every nation has stories worth telling. Every soldier deserves to be remembered. World War II ended 80 years ago, but the stories are still being uncovered. The voices are still being heard. Archivists are restoring footage. Historians are finding letters. Families are sharing memories. And as long as we remember, as long as we listen, the forgotten allies will never truly be forgotten. Because history isn't just about the big names and famous battles. It's about the millions who fought, suffered, and survived. It's about Jean-Pierre, who risked his life in the French resistance. It's about Klaus, the German soldier who questioned everything. It's about Jimmy, the American paratrooper who jumped into darkness. The Canadian who stormed Juno Beach. It's about Ravi, the Indian soldier who fought in the jungles of Burma. Their stories matter, their sacrifices matter, their voices matter. And we will not let them be forgotten. Did you know about these stories? Did you know about France's resistance, Germany's dissenters, Canada's D-Day heroics, India's massive contribution? If this video taught you something new, hit that like button. If you believe all World War II soldiers, not just the famous ones, deserve recognition, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Tell us, which story surprised you most? Which nation's contribution did you not know about? Subscribe for more untold World War II stories, forgotten histories, and the voices that shaped our world. And share this video with anyone who loves history and wants to hear the full story, not just the simplified Hollywood version, because some stories are too important to be forgotten. Thank you for watching. And remember, history is not just what we're told, it's what